Boom. All right, everybody. What's up? It's me, Jacob here. I just got out of bed about 10 seconds ago, so you can probably tell from my hair that it's been quite the day for me. You can also probably see that it is 5:10. So if you connect the dots, I woke up at around 5 p.m. today, and I'm feeling like a complete and utter lunatic, but we're here to make another Cadence video. Let's get right into it. So in this video, we're going to be talking a lot about enumeration. It's going to be a pretty short video because there's not that much going on. I'd also like to give sort of like a note that I've been coding in Cadence for about a year and a half now, and I've never once ever used enumerations in any of my projects. So I'm not too sure like if you'll be using these a lot, and they're definitely not up like high on the list in terms of importance, but it's still good to know just in case. It's always good to know what exists in the language. Enumerations exist a lot in Solidity, so if you're coming from like an Ethereum/Solidity background, it might be helpful to know. But I don't use enumerations that much, and I'll sort of explain why towards the end of the video. But what I have here is I have the enumerations documentation lined up here. So we can see that there's, it's basically what enumerations are, is they're like a list of options that are predefined for you. So if you think about like when you're playing chess and there's two players, the black and white player, you know, there are only ever two options of that case. There's no blue player, there's no red player, right? There's only ever two options. And so when you have that sort of use case, it makes sense to have an enumeration because you can quite easily select which option you want, you know, and you can define that ahead of time. So let's actually go ahead and use an example. So let's do pub enum, and let's call it chess player. Let's open up our brackets here. And inside your enum, what you can do is you can have different cases. So public case white and public case black. So these are the different players that you're going to have in your chess game. And one other thing you have to add here is you have to add either uint8, or I believe the other option it tells you is int128. What that means is that each of these cases, like behind the scenes, is actually represented by a number. So when you put uint8 here, that means that, you know, this is actually represented with the ID 0, and this is actually represented with 1. But you can use white and black actually in your code to make it a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and do an example of this. Let's make a resource called player. And in this player, there's going to be one thing, a color. And this is going to be a chess player type. So inside of our init function, we can actually take in, let's do init color, and let's take in a chess player, like so. And we're just going to initialize self.color equal to the color that we pass in, right? This is pretty standard resource stuff. And then the only other thing we're going to add to this example is a public function create player. And this is just going to return a player resource, right? And it's just going to return a created player resource that, of course, passes in a color that we're going to take into this function right here. So you can see that we're referring to the color that we pass in as a chess player type. And that means that this color will have to either be white or black. There's no other option. So it's a great way of like restricting the choices that you have as well. You know, the alternative to this would be to have a dictionary or something like that. And the dictionary held white and black in it. And so when you pass in a color, it said, oh, is it nil? Does it exist? But the cool thing about enums is that it checks that ahead of time. So it wouldn't have even allowed you to pass in a color unless it was a chess player color, which is white or black. So if we deploy this contract, it's gonna, I guess it's deployed. For some reason, it's not showing me the thing. Let's go into our transaction. Oh, and I was doing this before the video, so ignore that. But what we can do here is we can say, let player, we're gonna move the resource in by doing enum example that I deployed to account 1. Dot create player. Let me actually refresh the page so it gives me like the auto completion. So dot create player, and it's asking us to pass in a color here, right? So how do we do that? Well, we can pass in a color by referring to the chess player type, which is enum example dot chess player, right? That's the same with resources and stuff like that. This is, you know, enum example dot player. So this is enum example dot chess player. So let's say enum example dot chess player, and then let's say dot black. And you can notice that it goes through, right? And so then it's complaining, you know, loss of resource. So afterwards, let's log player.color. And then we're going to destroy the player resource like so. So if we run this transaction, you'll see, it's because it's glitching. If I have to refresh the playground, it's that. Okay, so if I run this transaction, it's going to say, boom, there's my player.color. So it's giving me, you'll notice that it's actually giving me the raw value. So like I mentioned earlier, you know, these are actually represented by numbers. So this is 0 and this is 1. So when I logged it, it logged 1, right, which is black. So it's a little confusing how it does that, but that's basically how it refers to that type. And what you can also do is you can log player.color.raw value, and that will actually give you that number. So if I run this again, you'll notice it gives me 1, right? So that raw value is like that ID that it's referring to. So this is pretty much how you would use enums in Cadence. The one other thing you can do, I'll just mention this for now. If for some reason you didn't want to do enum example.chessplayer.black, another way you can refer to it is by doing raw value and then like putting in the raw value here. And that should be the exact same thing. So what you would do is enum example.chessplayer, and then you can actually pass in the raw value instead. And in this example, 1 means black. Now you'll notice that that isn't optional, and that's because it's saying, well, this may not actually be a value, right? Because if we put in 5 here, what's that going to return, right? So if let's try and unwrap this optional. If we send it, it's going to say unexpectedly found nil, right? Because raw value doesn't exist for 5, but it does for 0 and 1. So if we wanted to do 1 here, and we unwrap the optional by putting the little exclamation mark here, and we send it, you'll notice it's going to give us the correct stuff here. So that's really all there is to it. With enums and Cadence, if you want to, you can go ahead and read the documentation in here. It's pretty straightforward. There's not that much going on. But yeah, and you can also like compare the colors, right? So like in this case, they were using colors. But if we wanted to do chess players, you could compare the chess players to see if they're equal, stuff like that. So that's really all there is to it. I hope this was a interesting video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.